Right, so I figured it would be cool to break down a beat before I put it up on my store. You can get the link to my store below. So we're gonna start with the melody. I always build up tracks from the melody first. On this one, I didn't want to sample, so I've been using a synth called Vacuum, which was actually a cheapie I got from Plugin Boutique for like $1. So shout out to them, but I've been using it a lot. It has this kind of computer sound that I like. So I just wrote a little progression around that. And I start beats in session view. So we'll play that clip. Once I got that little bounce together, I started building up the house. So I put the rhythm section down, kick, snare, and probably the 808 in the hats. The kick and snare pattern's pretty basic. Trying to leave a lot of room for a vocalist or an MC. Hi-hat pattern does some nice little rolls. We'll bring that in. Cool. And then once I got the house built, so to speak, or the rhythm section down, I actually started looking into some splice samples. So initially I found a guitar sample that I liked a lot. It was just a single chord shot. I'll link to the pack below, but I dumped it into Simpler so I could then play chords and just built a little progression around the synth line. We'll solo that group. I think next I wanted to get an 808 in now that I have a basic idea of what the melody's doing. So the 808, for that I use Substation. Yeah, Substation this is a gem if you can still find it. Zaytoven actually was the person who mentioned it first, at least on my radar, but it's been going around for a while. They have a lot of the bass and 808 sounds that you've heard in a lot of current trap joints. I use a lot of different sources for bass, and I always end up going to different bass plugins, but this one stays in my arsenal because there's just a couple of built-in sounds that I like a lot. So Substation is very dope if you can find it. Shout out to Dope Kits. And I just added a basic 808 pattern to supplement the melody. I like doing those descending high notes into the root note again. I feel like it does a cool thing with the energy. So I didn't want to do too much. I wanted to leave a lot of room for an MC to do their thing over it, but I did want to add some kind of vocal texture and just a hook element. So I went back to Splice and found this really dope vocal sample that I was able to process. Let me solo it so you can hear it. Here's the vocal soloed with no effects. It's a super dope vocal sound. It already has a lot of reverb, so I didn't want to add any more verb to it and muddy it up. But I did want to introduce some movement to it. So I'm using a flanger effect, which I've been using a lot more lately for two reasons. One, it adds movement and space to things without needing a reverb, which is always good. But it also is a stereo imaging effect, which means it moves that information out of the center of the speakers and it moves it to the left and the right. And as a rapper, that leaves more room dead center for your vocals. So I think you're hearing a lot of those flanger and phaser effects, especially in like Southern hip hop, because it does just that. It moves the instrumentation out of the way, but it leaves room for a vocalist to kind of leave their vocal dead and center. So I added a flanger to this, and it kind of just makes some movement occur. And that's kind of the whole beat. So usually once I have this section, or at least this many elements in session view, this is my basic groove. And that's kind of the hook that I want to build around. The rest of the process is arranging things down into sections, which is done in arrangement view, obviously. And so I took the rest of the time and kind of sequenced things out, added intros, added some changes and some progressions to the guitar that you'll hear later on. Vocal comes out here. This is pretty much where the verse is going to sit. And you've got a 8-bar sequence for the first half of the verse, 8-bar sequence for the second half of the verse. Second half of the sequence will bring the bass back in. Take the guitar out. So the whole thing about that is the verse is going to be sitting here instead of what I used to do, stacking more instruments to try to make the section sound different, which makes more room for your rapper to compete with. You're just interchanging the elements. So the hook had everything playing. The first part of this verse, we're taking the bass out, we're taking that vocal out, and the guitar and the synth are leading the show. The second half of that verse, we take the guitar out, we take the bass and bring that back in, and now the bass and the synth are leading the show. And then when the hook comes back around, all the elements get reintroduced. So another quick tip before we close things up, instead of adding things in the verse section, kind of work the other way around, do the destructive arrangement and take things out, again, making more room for your vocalists to do what they need to do. And you can make things spicy with little rhythmic elements or mutes and solos, which you'll hear in the full beat. Click the link to hear that. But the key thing to take away from it is just you don't need to add more things into the soup. Sometimes the soup needs things to come out so a person can really sit properly in the mix. So if you enjoy this kind of content, hit me up, like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you want covered in this beat or previous beats. Be well. Take care of your peoples. Be creative. Love yourself. Love your neighbors. Come on.
Man, this shit is sick.